He previously served in leadership at the Heritage Foundation and has been part of the conservative media space for over 2 decades. Today, let's talk about the changing media landscape, the collapse of legacy media trust, and what Rob thinks comes next.
It's good to be with you, Kurt.
Yeah, I'm pumped. So some of our audience, maybe they've not heard of Daily Signal, maybe 99% have. But if they haven't, what is it? Why does it exist? Tell a little bit about it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So the Daily Signal was founded in 2014 by the Heritage Foundation, as you mentioned. I was working at Heritage at the time, which is when you and I first had an opportunity to meet and collaborate. And the idea behind the Daily Signal was that there was an explosion of new media outlets in that early part of the 2010s, including a couple other dailies, right?
Yeah.
Daily Caller, Daily Wire, The Federalist, Breitbart. I mean, you can go down the list, and all of them were serving a unique audience and different segments of the population. But we really felt that what was missing was somebody to cover not only what was happening in Washington, D.C., but through the lens of public policy. And so being part of the Heritage Foundation, which is a public policy organization, it was just natural to have a news organization that would be doing that work. And so it's a combination of not only publishing commentary and op-eds from experts, policy experts who range, from domestic issues to foreign issues to legal issues, but also hiring a team of news reporters who I really challenge on a daily basis to be disruptors in the media landscape, to go out and ask the questions at the White House press briefing room or in Speaker Johnson's press conference, or increasingly in state capitals, which we can get into, that other legacy media organizations probably are not going to ask. And this is true both from a purely conservative media perspective. There are just simply not a lot of the other outlets in the room, or from a Christian media perspective, which I'm glad to see more and more of them start to enter and get access to these institutions, which traditionally in the past have shut them out.
Yeah. So what, and you kind of addressed that, what gap in the media landscape do you think, what's your special niche? This is policy. Let's go a little bit into that. How do you view that?
There was an incident that triggered it a couple of years earlier. The Biden White House, for whatever reason, I suspect that it was because Joe Biden didn't want to have critical coverage at a time when there were a lot of people asking questions about his mental acuity, decided to revoke the press credentials of 442 news outlets, including the Daily Signal. And for us, as we looked at that moment, and losing access to the White House was detrimental to our ability to really cover Washington the way that we wanted. And so what we decided to do was to start the process of spinning off from Heritage and becoming our own independent organization. And so that allowed us to not only retain some of those things that I talked about earlier, we still focus on policy issues, but really it has expanded our editorial footprint. And so I would say that there are a few things that distinguish us from other media outlets. Number one, investigative reporting. We're very proud of the team that we've assembled that's doing investigative journalism. It's a hard thing to do. It requires a lot of time. It requires some special talents. The second area is really expanding our reach into states. At a time when you hear a lot about news deserts and the vanishing local and state-based news publications, we've had some generous donors step up and say, we would like to see the Daily Signal help fill that void. And so we added correspondents in Virginia and Ohio to try to replicate some of the things that we do in the nation's capital in places like Richmond and Columbus. In 2026, we're expanding to California and Georgia. And so we hope to continue to grow that effort. And then the last area is really giving a voice to individuals who I think in today's day and age are needed. We live at a time when anybody who has an X account or a strong Instagram following can really shape the agenda or narrative around things. And so what can the Daily Signal do in that space? And so one of the things that we embarked upon in 2025 was to bring on Victor Davis Hanson as a senior contributor. And to do so in a way, Victor writes a syndicated column. He did a long form podcast, but we asked Victor to do short 5 to 10 minute videos about the day's news and really break down the issues in a way that the American people could understand. So I have often said from the time that the Daily Signal started that we have a time-constrained audience. We have parents who are busy with their responsibilities as moms and dads, their commitments to church, other things that they've got going on in their life, whether it be their job or just other various responsibilities that they're doing. They don't have the time to sit down and read a newspaper as in the old days.
Right.
So we need to give them content in bite-sized nuggets, and so that was our attempt to do that, and it worked out fabulously successful. We had extraordinary growth in 2025. Our YouTube subscriptions grew from about 350,000 to over 1 million. We've expanded our email list to over 900,000 subscribers. And as you know, from working in this, having an owned audience where you can communicate directly with those individuals is important, because you never know how those social media algorithms might change and limit our reach.
Yes, literally overnight.
Right,
right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. I was thinking about this when I was preparing for the interview. So I think there's been some commentary on the idea that so much of our media has become partisan, right?
Yes.
And I, on one hand, I'm not particularly shaken by that, in the sense that at least we now know what we're listening to. So prior to this, it was partisan. It just was pretending to be impartial.
Yes.
I'd rather have a news unit say, hey, we lean left or we lean right, right? But I know you talk about fair and accurate journalism as well. So you have this balance here. There's no hiding the fact that Daily Signal comes from a conservative perspective, but you also want to be fair and accurate, so you're not a political organization pushing an agenda per se. And so how do you balance that?
It's a good question. Yeah. And in fact, I'll go back all the way to my first college class in journalism, Journalism 101, where they talked about objectivity. And I think that was a different era, right? I mean, the Walter Cronkites, the Tom Brokaws, the Peter Jennings, it's doesn't exist anymore. And there was a period of time, I think it happened gradually, because I think having worked in journalism at the time when George W. Bush was president, you saw the bias. And going back to that, I think it was it probably ratcheted up to another level when Donald Trump started running for president. Right. And so yeah, there are challenges. Now, I do think that a lot of those corporate media entities still hide behind the veneer of objectivity, even though many of the people who are on those stations are probably not, in reporting the news, have an agenda.
Right.
And I wish that they would just come forward and be transparent about it. So we don't hide the fact that we're conservative. Now, I distinguish between having an ideological perspective or a religious perspective, right, than a partisan perspective. There are news outlets that certainly carry water for the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. I think that it's important for news organizations like ours, the Daily Signal, to hold anybody who's in elected office accountable. There are times that we're critical of the Trump administration because of things that they've done that may not be consistent with our values and principles. And so I think that that's where the issue of trust comes into play. You see these polls from the Pew Research Center or Gallup, which measure trust in media, and they are always, it seems, going down.
Yeah.
And I think that that's problematic, even including for organizations like ours, because we want to restore some of that trust. If you go back over 100 years and you look at how the press used to operate, I mean, certainly it was much more partisan back then. Then we entered the era where there was a lot of consolidation. There were 3 television networks. People largely gathered around the TV between 6 and 7 o'clock to consume the news or got their morning newspaper. And now it's decentralized again, right? Anybody, I mean, you have a show here, and look at all the people that are at NRB broadcasting and reaching millions of people. And so we just have to recognize that the media environment has changed dramatically. It's more incumbent upon individual consumers to decipher and make critical decisions about where they get their news and who they can trust. And so that's that puts the onus on individuals in a way that I think we're still working through some of those challenges, because there are some individuals who may have a more conspiratorial tone in their coverage that have taken off and are among the fastest growing podcasters and some of the biggest platforms that exist today.
Yeah, well, absolutely true. And, I was at this little known event in December that Turning Point put on.
Yes.
And it felt like that was the main topic of the event was what's responsible coverage and how should we respond to some of this more conspiratorial stuff. And some of it's a little, concerning. And
It is, and it's nothing. It's nothing new. I think it's just the scale at which it now exists, right? I mean, there was always the National Enquirer.
right.
When I was growing up, you'd go to the grocery store and you see those outrageous headlines, and you'd be like, "Mom and Dad, can I get?"
Yes, exactly.
And today, you just have the ability with an iPhone to subscribe to a podcast or watch a YouTube video or consume content on Instagram or wherever the platform might be. And there's not a there's nothing really stopping you. And I think where it's particularly challenging is, as a parent myself, so many of our kids' friends are consuming the information, and they feel left out if they're not also part of that community. And so we've been restrictive as parents in terms of allowing our kids to access social media. But I'm not so ignorant to know that they're not in their friend circle or sharing things and talking about things that they may see.
Yeah.
In which case, not always might be truthful.
Yeah. Well, it is. And people come to me because I work in politics, and sometimes they'll ask me, what do you read and trust?
Yes.
And I often say, I don't know anymore, right? I have a few rules that I don't know anybody else has. If anything immediately confirms my bias, I am 100% skeptical of it from day one. Because I think that's when people are trying to get you, they're trying to get you by, taking something that I already believe. If it says, that Hillary Clinton is a criminal, well, that's something I want to believe. So I'm going to question that. Right?
Sure.
And that's probably being fed to me because people know I lean right, But it is hard. I think so many people struggling with trust right now.
Yes. You need to have those critical thinking skills. In fact, I think this is one of the reasons why, as a parent myself, I just did not see the public schools in Northern Virginia encouraging that type of thinking.
Yeah.
In our students. And that is, I think, to the detriment of this next generation. I always talk about people having a balanced media diet. In fact, I have people all the time say, I rely on the Daily Signal as my number one source of news. And I'm very flattered and grateful that I have supporters who do that. But I also realize the responsibility then on us and our team to do that. And I always tell individuals, I say, you should consume content that you may not necessarily agree with. And I'm not saying that you have to subscribe and pay for it and support it financially, but seek out different opinions and perspectives on issues, particularly where we're having these large debates in our country, whether it be about foreign wars or trade and tariffs or economic policy, social. I mean, there's so many things that are happening in our country right now, and if you're only getting your news from the sources that confirm your bias, you're probably missing out, and you're not going to be as an informed citizen as you could.
Yeah. So I like when you're talking about investigative journalism, because I think that's such a tough thing to do these days. And so many newsrooms, this is the story of Indianapolis, right? You talked about this too. The Indianapolis Star used to have hundreds of reporters. Sure. And now they have dozens of reporters, if that. And so they aren't writing very often long form investigative because they just don't have time to do it, right? And some of the reporters I've talked to, some of these newsrooms are so, you got to get me 10 stories today, 10 stories today.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, the quotas that they have.
Yeah. And so they don't have time to ask questions and challenge, because to get 10 articles written, you maybe have time to call one or two sources. So that's one thing I know. This is somebody who's professionally in politics. Sometimes I can tell, I know who that person talked to, right? Because they're pushing that agenda, right? And so it's so cool to have the time to get into investigative. So how do you pick those? What's the idea behind the investigative journalism?
So a couple of things. I mean, I would say there's different types of investigative journalism. So there's the investigative journalism that you're doing like through computer assisted reporting, right? You're diving deep into data and records and maybe filing FOIA requests and getting information back. And so there's that aspect. And then there's the aspect of investigative journalism where you're actually going on location and you are knocking on doors or interviewing sources. And obviously Nick Shirley made a lot of news recently that addressed the coverage in Minnesota. And so I think for us, it's striking the balance. We've sent people like Virginia Allen on our team out to places like the border to see firsthand with their own eyes what's going on and to report back. And so, there's investigative elements of that. I would say that where we've probably had the most success and had certainly the recognition from places like the Dow Prize last year is through the examination of, and this is where Tyler's series on what he calls the woke-topus. It's how the left has embedded so deeply in government agencies that regardless of whether the president changes or not, they're still able to carry out their agenda kind of at the lower levels. And so exposing that, who the players are, who the special interest groups or the organizations on the outside who are really dictating what that agenda should be, who's bankrolling it. Those are the types of stories that I think have really had an impact and set the Daily Signal down a course where we've had some success. But it doesn't stop with just examining the government. I mean, this could happen throughout cultural institutions as well, right? I mean, and we see that in some cases throughout the religious organizations. And so, and I think where Tyler has probably had the greatest success is through his coverage of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And the Southern Poverty Law Center developed, I believe in 2012, what they call a hate map. And they put organizations like the Family Research Council on that map. And in recent years, they put TPUSA and PragerU and Alliance Defending Freedom and others on that map as well, which really they're undeserving of that because, I mean, there are organizations like the Ku Klux Klan on that map that are in quite a different category as the ones that I just mentioned. What's happened, Kurt, is that you have a situation now where it could be government agencies, it could be individuals who really go after those organizations in a way that that demonize them and try to harm them financially. Corporations sometimes stop giving to these organizations because they rely on the SPLC ratings, Amazon being one of the most famous. And so it's an ever-present challenge that I think conservative and Christian organizations probably face these days because of the censors that exist out there. And I don't know ultimately where we end up, but I will say it's really encouraging to have some allies in the Trump administration, like a Brendan Carr at the FCC or an Andrew Ferguson at the FTC, who are raising awareness about some of these challenges and really making sure that the American people understand the threats that people face.
Yeah, I do like, there's certain versions of Trump 2.0, which I love about just how more aggressive they are, and they seem to understand what you're talking about. Woke-topus, right? And
that's right.
That you gotta dig deeper. And some of the stuff that Doge drummed up was both not surprising and totally shocking at the same time. $2 billion to Stacey Abrams for an organization that didn't exist 4 days previous. Shocking, but sort of not surprising. Right?
Not surprising, but then the frustrating part about it is as outrageous as the American people find some of that thing, and then it's like, okay, you actually go through the process in Congress of trying to make the cuts and make changes, and you run into a brick wall. And so I think that's probably why when Elon Musk is now asked about Doge, would you do it all over again? He's kind of skeptical and doubtful because so little actually happened. There was a lot of exposure and transparency, which is good, but it requires somebody taking that next step and actually doing something about it. I mean, you and I think we probably first connected during the Tea Party era, right? And I mean, there was outrage at the national debt, and look at how much worse it is today than it was back in 2010. And you're wondering, it's not that people haven't sent representatives to Congress to do something about it. It's just that sometimes they lack the courage or the willpower to actually follow on those promises.
Well, every dollar has a constituency, right?
Right.
So we get, when you say we're going to stop granting money to these organizations, inevitably some organization you're all about gets cut out of the thing too. And I always laughed about it when I was in college because we rabid right-wing college Republicans were all in favor of the government cutting spending, except on student loans.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. We wanted those, right?
Sure.
And so you have to be willing to take, to your point, it's not just stopping the stuff that's going to Stacey Abrams. It's the other corporate welfare that benefits some of our friends, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think some of this stuff just comes to a close.
It does. It does. Now, I do give them credit for doing things like massive reforms to USAID.
Yeah.
Foreign aid is always one of those things that pops up as the number one thing that people think we should cut, and redirecting that money here domestically. But yes, there are still far too many grants and other taxpayer dollars that are being shipped off to causes that probably don't align with the vast majority of the Americans.
Yeah. And gutting the Department of Education is like a conservative fever dream. I still don't understand the justification for it to this day. I don't understand to some extent why anyone is in favor of an organization that's nothing but a stopping point for education dollars. They suck their piece out of it before it gets to schools or does anything good for anybody.
Anytime in this case, in the 1970s when Jimmy Carter created it, or other institutions like the EPA, I mean, once you create something, and this was always the argument with Obamacare, and you'll remember the effort to repeal Obamacare. It's so difficult once a government program starts to be able to terminate it, and so that's where I think the Trump administration does deserve credit for looking at ways that they can actually finally bring an end to these. Now, so much is done through executive order today.
Right, yeah.
You sometimes worry that the next president could come in and undo a lot of those things and reverse the trend, which is why you really probably need a sustained 12 years, 4 years of Trump and then two successive terms with somebody who's, going to follow through on those policies to make sure that you make those reforms. And it doesn't stop there. Yeah, you need to start to chip away at that national debt and make sure that that next generation of Americans, my kids and their kids, aren't burdened with this huge debt.
Yeah, well, that feels sometimes like an insurmountable issue where the interest payments are so big.
Yeah,
you have to cut so much, and so when I was skeptical when Elon was doing Doge, he was talking about these big numbers, and I thought, not if you don't touch Social Security. Not if you don't touch the Department of Defense. We got to touch all of them. It accumulates, and 1% at a time doesn't feel so crazy. But the penny plan went the same way that every other plan has. I think we had a presidential Perry Johnson. He made it the 2 pennies plan because now we were too far gone to just penny.
Yes. Well, I mean, you have good people on Capitol Hill who are trying to. I mean, the Republican Study Committee came out with a budget plan that balances in 10 years.
Yes,
it can be done. It's increasingly difficult to do that because the numbers are so extreme today. But you just need, again, the courage to do that. I mean, let's face it. It's hard enough to fund the government on an annual basis without some sort of shutdown taking place. So you really need to have a situation where probably you're not dealing with a 1-seat majority or a couple seat majority.
Poor guy. Worst job in Washington right now is Mike Johnson's, right? I mean, you got no margin for error. I think it's been a miracle of epic proportions that he's remained in that position because it's so close.
It's so close, and yet he consistently delivers and gets the job done. And of course, Mike Johnson, probably at least in my time, somebody who is a strong Christian, somebody who puts prayer at the beginning of his day. And I would imagine that given what he has, given the hand that he's been dealt as speaker, it's a trying time on a daily basis. And that's because in the past, you would have groups like the House Freedom Caucus or the Republican Study Committee or the Main Street Caucus or whatever it might be. And you needed that coalition that was really going to band together in order to make a change.
Right.
Now you just need 1 or 2 people, right? because that's how slim the margins are. And you know that the Democrats are going to be a lockstep.
Oh, yes.
And they're not going to peel off. So really, it's holding together the Republicans.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So let's talk a little bit about the business a little bit. You've got email newsletters, you've got podcasts, you've got traditional, written content. How does all that play together in your growth strategy? What's the thinking behind what you're building?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. So it ultimately starts with the content. I mean, you have to create great content for the audience to want to consume it and to attract new subscribers. I would say that the reason we decided to make a strong pivot post 2015 to email is because we wanted to own the audience. We saw firsthand Facebook. We went from Facebook driving 75 to 90% of the traffic to Daily Signal in our early days, 2014 and 2015, to a point when they started to change the algorithm around the time that Donald Trump emerged. And that led us to explore other ways that we can make sure that we were distributing the content. Now, in today's day and age, yes, you're absolutely right. You mentioned podcast. We have 5 different shows that we produce at the Daily Signal. I think it's really important to diversify where those podcasts appear. So you better believe that in our case, it's going to be on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but probably also Rumble and YouTube, which is a huge, platform for podcasts today. Outrageous growth on Truth Social for whatever reason. And so there's an audience there that's consuming Daily Signal content that 2 years ago, we didn't have much of a presence at all. And so today, the Daily Signal across all social media platforms has over 6 million followers. We're very proud of that loyal audience that relies on us to provide that news. When it comes to the different types of content that we're producing, I also think that there needs to be a variety and some diversity because people will want different things. So there are some who enjoy our nightly broadcast from Tony Kinnett out of Indiana, who does his show from 7 to 8 Eastern every night. Then there are the others who like the Victor Davis Hanson, whether it be the short form videos that we release each afternoon or the longer form podcast that Victor does 4 times a week. There are shows that are catered to specific audiences like problematic women. We are trying intentionally to reach young, conservative women who we feel oftentimes are ignored by not only the broader media landscape, but even sometimes conservative media. And so we have Virginia Allen, who's our host there, who does a phenomenal job with that. And then finally, I would say there's the space for short form documentaries and other stories that go beyond the written word. So yes, I think that every reporter or journalist needs to have a foundation in writing. I always tell our interns or fellows when they start, that's where they need to really, hone their skills on a craft, because if you can't start as a good writer, chances are you're not going to be able to have success on other platforms. And so we have tried to carve out a niche for the Daily Signal when it comes to producing these short form documentaries, oftentimes on location in different places across the country, and those have been successful. I think that there's a market. I certainly see it here in NRB, right? People increasingly are turning to visual mediums,
right,
to gather their news and information. So we have to be there too. We have to meet the audience where they are.
Absolutely, and that's a pretty sizable audience. So, and a lot of our audience are conservative or Christian business people. They have services or products that they would love to get in front of a conservative or Christian audience. So this is somebody, by the way, who has one, for those of you who are watching. And so if somebody wanted to read Daily Signal, where do they go? If somebody wanted to learn more about how to partner with you guys, how do they do that?
Well, so this is thank you for bringing this up, and thank you for those kind words. So when the Daily Signal's first 10 years, we were intentionally, we turned away advertising. We would have advertisers come to us and they'd say, hey, we want to reach that audience. And because of the affiliation with Heritage, we just said no. When we spun off and became our own independent outlet, we decided to have advertisers, to have sponsors for our shows. And so now you will see on the Daily Signal website and our email newsletters, certainly in our podcast productions and other things that we create, there are advertisements. And so it's been great. We are selective in terms of who we partner with, because we don't, we certainly, if someone's values or beliefs don't align with ours, we don't want to be featuring that type of ad on our alongside our content. And so it's been great to work with organizations like PragerU, for instance, which is a regular advertiser with us, or the Government Accountability Institute and Peter Schweitzer and the work that he does. And so I would encourage those who might be listening to check out the Daily Signal. Go to dailysignal.com, look at us across all of the different social media platforms or podcast platforms where they may consume news and information. Again, It's an audience that is highly engaged.
Mhm.
They are highly engaged news consumers. They're also highly educated,
Yep.
which we appreciate. So they are more likely probably to take action when it comes to something at the local or state level or national
Yep.
level, because they are paying attention to the policies that are being debated in their local communities or at their state government. And so that's exciting to have an audience like that you
Yeah.
know that is going to respond favorably to the content that you're creating.
Absolutely. So one big think before we
Yeah.
end here. So if trust in the media keeps collapsing, what do you think replaces it? What responsibility you personally feel to make sure whatever replaces legacy media is better and not just louder?
Well, I don't think okay, so you're absolutely correct that that I do think more and more people are turning away from legacy media. At the same time, I think that those legacy news organizations will always exist, or there will be a place for them. They just still have a massive footprint. At least in my lifetime, I think that's the case. I think it's important for us as conservatives when we get invited to do those shows. And so I always say yes to opportunities to go on a CNN or an NBC or an ABC and not only provide a conservative perspective, but hopefully also, when appropriate, to bring a Christian perspective
Yeah.
as well, to make sure that I'm sharing my values. Because I often think those viewpoints are not represented very well at all in legacy media. So I did want to say that at the start. And I think that in many cases, CBS being more recent example has been in the news, right? Where they're trying to make some big changes at CBS under the
Yeah.
leadership of Barry Weiss, where they recognize that the audience is moving away from them. And if they're going to remain relevant, they need to make changes. Now, who replaces them is the big question. I mean, we have seen massive growth with podcasters. We saw in the 2024 election, and some people dubbed it the podcast election,
Yeah.
because Donald Trump purposefully went directly to podcasters to bypass the legacy media. I think that's going to increasingly happen. Maybe not at all levels of government. I mean, you work with candidates and politicians, and so I think that they recognize that there is an audience out there that they can talk directly to, and they don't necessarily have to deal with all of the challenges of legacy media. I don't know,
30 seconds left. It's like, that's, you know,
taking it out of
not anything.
Yes. And so, so I think that my responsibility and role is to be a good steward of the Daily Signal. We work with a lot of young journalists. We have a pretty young team ourselves, and so having the benefit of founding the Daily Signal, to working with Kate Trinko, who's our editor in chief, who was there with me when we started it way back in 2014, has given us that stability and foundation. At the same time, we have 4 journalism fellows who join us every year, and I feel a great responsibility to make sure that we are training them on what is responsible and fair journalism. And that doesn't mean just echoing the Republican talking points. That actually means seeking out Democrats. Same thing with the interns that we get. I'm often pushing them and challenging them to take that next step, to make another call, to maybe walk the halls of Congress and try to get somebody to respond to a question that otherwise, you might count them out and discount them.
Right.
And so those are the responsibilities that I feel, maybe more as a traditional old school journalist. And then the final point that I'll say is, I think that the access that we've been able to gain at the White House after having our credentials revoked, being back in the seat at the White House, in Congress, at the Pentagon, at the Supreme Court, I don't want to take any of that for granted, because I realize that a new administration could come in or leadership could change and they could revoke those credentials again,
Right.
and we could be on the outside. And so I am doing everything that we can to establish the Daily Signal reputation in Washington, D.C. among those gatekeepers that still
Right.
exist, so that it'll be harder for them to remove us in the future.
Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful to have you, Rob.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you so much. Thank you, folks, for giving us 30 minutes of your time. We so appreciate it. If you like the content, please like and subscribe so you can see more. Until next time.